It is Friday, February the 26th, and that means it's time for my news radar. Let me quickly remind you guys that this channel is community supported. If you can take a brief moment and consider becoming a member by clicking that join button down below on YouTube, or perhaps becoming a patron on Patreon, that would help us out a ton. If you can't afford to do that, consider just hitting that like button or leaving a comment down below to help out with the algorithm. Thanks. So I've talked on this channel a few different times about Microsoft's forays into ARM processing with Windows on ARM devices like the Surface Pro X, which did use Microsoft and Qualcomm's joint effort on the SQ1 and SQ2 chip. Now, while the Surface Pro X does have a lot of good things going for it, when you stack it up against what Apple has done with the M1, it's clear that the silicon there, that system on a chip, was just not quite on the same level as what Apple had done. Now, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. I'm not saying that the Surface Pro X isn't a good device and can't be an enjoyable device for you to use. I'm just simply stating that the SQ2, when compared to the M1, it's not really a comparison there now, is it? In order for Windows on ARM to take that next step, Qualcomm is going to have to push things a whole hell of a lot further than they have to this point, and something that's going to help make this Windows on ARM world a bit more possible is competition, and that's what it looks like we're going to be getting here on Windows Central. Samsung reportedly set to launch a Windows 10 laptop with Exynos and AMD inside. So there's been rumors going for a little bit now that Samsung was working on an ARM processor, one of their Exynos processors. But the crazy thing here is that they're working with AMD to bring AMD graphics into the fold for that Exynos processor. Obviously, AMD has made leaps and strides with their integrated graphics, with their Vega graphics on their Ryzen chips, and letting AMD bring some of that expertise over to the Exynos to help out with that GPU, which has been a really soft spot for the Exynos processors. That could be absolutely game-changing. Samsung will reportedly launch a Windows 10 laptop running an Exynos processor and an AMD GPU. This is reported by ZDNet Korea. And the timeline here is supposedly after the release of the next Galaxy Note, which is a weird thing because I've heard off and on for the last 8 months now that the Galaxy Note is dead. It's not dead. There's another one. There's not another one. So who knows when that's going to be. But you factor in the fact that it's not just Samsung doing this, but NVIDIA has talked about making their own ARM processors with their acquisition of ARM coming to fruition here shortly. The competition for ARM computing in laptops appears to be heating up in a really significant way, and in a way that I think you guys should be very excited about and excited to see where this goes. There's so many advantages to running ARM, and once the software catches up and the hardware is rapidly improving, this could get really, really cool. You're talking about much better battery life, much better thermals, endurance, all these sorts of things. Look at what they've done with the first gen M1 chips with Apple. They're punching up well above their weight class while having a TDP that is so much less than the things that they're competing with. It's not even funny. We get caught up a lot. Intel puts out these benchmarks showing that their i7 will outperform the M1, and it's like, yeah, that's great, but what's the TDP? What kind of juice are you using to beat this Apple? And the answer is a lot more. So M1 leading the way. We're gonna now get Samsung coming up as well with Qualcomm. We know that Windows and Microsoft, they're working on a much improved Qualcomm chip alongside Qualcomm, so that's going to happen. NVIDIA also appears to be readying an entrant for this race as well. Things are going to get really cool in ARM. Let's talk about a cool piece of tech that I have been watching for a little while now. I'm no fan of hole punches in phone screens, notches, things like that. I don't like the way that they look, and now we're finally starting to see something that can truly get rid of that, and that is under display cameras. ZTE has already released the first gen version of this tech, and now it looks like they're already working on Gen 2. And the cool thing about Gen 2 is it's actually going to feature a 3D face unlock also under that display. Now, currently all we know is that they're basically allowing light to pass through in between pixels of that screen, of that panel. You can imagine a grid like that of pixels, and they're just essentially widening that grid maybe to let extra light through. They've actually upped that PPI from 200 to 400 pixels per inch, so in that grid, which is going to make it a lot less noticeable, because before you could see this really nice screen and then a little square, the PPI would drop pretty precipitously, making it obvious the camera was there. Well, that's going to be a whole lot less noticeable at 400 PPI, and hopefully the picture quality can improve as well. You know, the software is going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting with this kind of thing, because you do get kind of a fuzzy looking image when you're shining when you're basically taking the picture through a screen. As for what they're doing with 3D face unlock, we don't have a lot of details yet, but the fact that they're trying to pull this off is really, really cool, and it's going to start to make Apple's water bathtub notch in the iPhones look even more dated than they already do. With rumors the under-display camera will be featured in the next Galaxy Z Fold and other phones like that, this clearly appears to be where the market is going in terms of ways to hide that front-facing camera while still giving you a front-facing camera. And lastly, let's talk about a phone called the Redmi K40. This is a phone that is made by a subsidiary of Xiaomi, and this thing is looking absolutely outstanding. It's trying to essentially throw a haymaker knockout blow to the S21 phones while coming in at a much reduced price. So we've got an image here on Android Authority of what this phone might look like. All three of the K40 phones, which will be the K40, the Pro, and the Pro Plus, will have a 6.67 inch 120 Hz FHD Plus screen featuring HDR10 Plus. They've all got a 4520 milliamp hour battery, 33 watt wired charging, which is decent, and a pretty good sized battery. 20 megapixel selfie camera in the center via a hole punch camera. No ZTE in under display cameras just yet. But then moving on there from the specs, the standard K40 will have that Snapdragon 870, which is sort of a step back from the 888, but still pretty fast, whereas the Pro and the Pro Plus will both have the 888. 6, 8, 12 gigs of RAM available in these phones. 128 gigs of UFS 3.1 storage, which is very, very fast. On the K40 Pro, you get a 48 megapixel main, 8 megapixel wide, 5 megapixel telephoto macro, and a 20 megapixel front-facing camera, whereas the Pro and the Pro Plus jump up to a 64 megapixel main camera and a 108 main camera. And here's the wild thing here. Consumers in China will be paying about $573 for the Redmi K40 Pro Plus. That is one hell of a deal, and the K40 standard $310. Pretty astonishing that Redmi/Xiaomi is able to produce these phones for these sorts of prices. Now, it's expected that once they actually do make their way over, the price will come up a little bit. It's not just a straight exchange a lot of the time with Xiaomi and Redmi, but do expect them to come in a whole hell of a lot cheaper than what Samsung is selling. At that price, these things will be an absolute steal. Let me know what you guys think about buying phones from these companies that are really big outside of the US, but maybe are pretty unknown in the United States. Like I've mentioned before, Jesse did use a Xiaomi Mi 9T Pro for a little over a year, and that phone was similarly priced to this while having specs that nearly matched my OnePlus 7 Pro. And that thing, honestly, for being less than half price of my OnePlus, I often wondered if I had made an unnecessary purchase by buying that OnePlus, because that Mi 9T Pro was so damn close. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments down below. That's all the news I've got for you today. Be sure to check back every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the next news radar. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friend.